Welcome back in. It's the Penn Live Wrestling Podcast. Dustin Hockensmith and Dave Heckard here. Continue our look at the Mid-Penn Conference in the 2021-22 season. This time around, we're focused on the Mid-Penn Commonwealth Division. Dave, a division that you came from, 17 years at Cumberland Valley, your first year away from the program in quite some time. Looking at this division and how tough it is, 6 teams here. The balance of power has really concentrated now between programs that, pretty traditional powers here. Cedar Cliff joining this division. You got your Cumberland Valley team, Central Dolphins, State College, Mifflin County. I mean, these are teams, especially this year, where it's going to be a pretty good fight for every spot in the final pecking order.
Yeah, I used to always say, like, this division of teams is one of the toughest divisions in the state. And I'm not saying district, I'm saying division. I know that division up there in District 11 with, Northampton and Nazareth, that's a pretty darn tough division. But look, I mean, this year, okay, looking at even state team rankings, I mean, State College at 14, Cumberland Valley at 15, Chambersburg at 17, Central Dolphin I think they had them at Central Dolphin was at 20, and then Mifflin County at 25. So here's the deal. I mean, you have 5 of the 6 teams ranked in the state of Pennsylvania in the top 25, and Cedar Cliff's no slouch this year. I think they're going to have a nice group of young kids. So, you and I were talking earlier. I said, the question is, like, man, who's coming in last in that division? And really, even if teams finish at the bottom, you still are a fairly tough team in that division, and I a lot of parity there, and always a fun division to wrestle in. And I'm excited to see some matches this year. So
this is a fun division any year. And by the way, I didn't mention Chambersburg by name. You mentioned that on there too. Obviously, Matt Menser and what they've been able to do, especially on the individual level, and their steady run of producing state medalists, state champions, state finalists. That continues this year with Carl Schinderdecker back, 2-time state medalist. He was in the state finals last year. Looked like he could certainly win that, looking ahead to this year. So that group too will be a tough out. Let's start here, and I'm going to go down through the predicted order of finish. This was by the division coaches. The predicted order of finish starts at the top. Their votes, Cumberland Valley, with 4 out of 6 first place votes coming in, and it's an interesting year. I mean, obviously, firsthand what's back for Cumberland Valley. Firsthand what's coming through the pipeline here, and I think that's the most interesting part of this group is that Billy Chamberlain, who was a state champ for CV, taking over the program now, and he's got this pretty large group of freshmen and sophomores, and he's got a deep roster too. And I think going into a year, especially in this division at this time, having a deep group of roster on your roster where you have some flexibility and you have some tough kids and you have guys who are going to be pretty good in situations where they've either got a score bonus or prevent bonus. I mean, he's got a lot of tools at his disposal to make a run at this division.
Yeah, the depth there and is going to be key for him. I mean, they're going to have so many moves that they can make in dual meets, with weighing guys in at different weights, with moving guys around. I mean, I know for a fact they have backups there that would start on 90% of the teams around, and not only do they have depth, but they have good depth, right? They have guys that they can put in there that can win varsity matches for them. And that's where I think, that's where they're going to be tough to beat is that depth. And from top to bottom this year, they're spread out well. They have some young guys that are going to be tough. The freshman and sophomore group is a tough group that's been wrestling together for a while. Billy has depth, and there's no question in my mind that Cumberland Valley this year will be a team in the hunt for a district title. Whether they get it done or not, you never know. Who can keep it together the longest, who can get through the season with the least amount of injuries and, all that kind of stuff. But I obviously my heart's with Billy and the Eagles, but I do honestly feel from my own perspective, not trying to, show any favoritism here, but I do think that they're going to be a tough out, and they got some good returners, and they're flexible. So
The more I look at this division and this Cumberland Valley team, the harder it is for me to pick against them. I don't formally file any picks. You know, I like to work it where the coaches are kind of making that call and they see it too. You know, obviously you lose the state champion in Jake Lucas, big time bonus point scorer, somebody that you can choose what to do with it, just automatic for 6 points. You know, I don't know that you can look at the group now and say this is an automatic 6 points in every duel, but you know, you have a kid like Connor Killian come in, a freshman at 106. I really liked what I saw with Alex Tennis. You know, as he wrestled 106, he's going to be a junior at 113. You know, Josiah Whitcomb, I still think there's a lot out there for him. Spencer Mockimer, you know, wrestled tough and won big matches for you. They're going to be replacing at 189, 215, and 285. So that'll be something, you know, worth watching. But Gabe Belk is back at 152. I thought, you know, he looked like he was pretty close to turning the corner last postseason. And certainly, I mean, he did, but I think there's a lot out there for him. I think, you know, looking at him in the district final against Bryce Buckman, you know, being a sophomore against a senior looked like it showed. Being a kid wrestling, you know, out of his element a little bit in terms of Bryce Buckman's willingness and his desire to scramble and get funky was tough for Gabe to handle. But I still think that there could be a state medal out there for him. And Anthony Brashino competed pretty hard in the upper weights as a freshman last year. Now as a sophomore, and kind of build on that experience. I just think there's a lot to like on this group.
no, there is. You know, the key is up top. You know, and they have some guys there, but just guys that are, you know, athletic, strong kids that aren't afraid to scrap with the Stair kid and Luca Bevilacqua and, you know, Jumper. I mean, those guys have some experience and they're not afraid to scrap. But you know, you're not going to replace a Jake Lucas. You know, you cannot replace a Gary Bertier, right? Like you can't replace guys like that. And so that'll be the thing for me is, can they pick up enough up top to, you know, to let their other guys do the work? And, you know, can they go 6 minutes? Can they win and beat the guys they're supposed to beat and not give up bonus? And that's going to be a key for them at the last couple of weights. You know, as far as the guys you mentioned, Belga, you know, great kid, hard worker, good family. I feel like the last, you know, 10 of my 17 years as a head coach, there was a Belga in my lineup somewhere, you know, and, you know, I great family and tough kid. And he did turn the corner last year, I felt like, and, you know, he just ran into a bear of a weight class there at the super region. I'm a big Brashino fan. I thought, you know, last year he was a kid that I had as a surprise pick at the end of the year to maybe qualify for the state tournament. I know it's crazy because he didn't make it out of sectionals, but he was a victim of the two-man, you know, taking the two guys last year. I mean, he was in the sectionals and he was winning 10-0 and got caught and pinned in the semifinals and didn't get to go.
And that's it.
And that's it. It was over. And you know, and his season ended, and that was a tough one. But dude, keep your eye out for him. He's going to be a tough one. And then, you know, Tennis and Whitcomb and Mockimer, and you know, those guys all have a ton of experience. Kitzmiller, and you know, I look, they have experience. There's good guys behind them. You know, keep an eye out for some of their freshmen. You know, the Killian kid, as you said, at 106. I really like Jake Mitchell. He's a freshman. He'll be right around 126 pounds for them. You know, hardworking kid that I think is going to be a good wrestler by the time it's all said and done. You know, I think in this division, Cumberland Valley is going to have to buckle their chin strap, though, every time they wrestle. So, you know, Central Dauphin's going to have something, you know, State College, Chambersburg, they're all, you know, you're going to get good dual meets there. And, you know, in order for them to win that division, I mean, they're going to have it together and be ready to go.
Looking down the line here, I mean, Central Dauphin, obviously long time rivalry with Cumberland Valley. And, you know, I think there have been some really fun moments, one of which you poked fun at yourself about in an earlier episode here, but just, you know, the competitive fire between these two teams. I mean, you're going to have to bring it to beat Central Dauphin. I think there's a lot of respect from the coaches to what Jeff Swaggart has done over the course of nearly 3 decades at CD. And, you know, you look at that CD on paper and you can kind of see some holes they're going to be scrambling to fill for a lot of the year, but I think as much as anybody else, Swigert has proven that whatever he's got in front of him, if he's got a state contender, he can get the most out of that kid. If he's got a first year kid, he'll get the most there. And I think there were a bunch of times, looking back over the last 2 years where, Swigert, Central Dolphin, in order to win, they had to avoid a pin in a situation, let's say, and the kid goes out there and they get that job done. Whatever he's asking of them, they've been able to do. Now, you have a bit of a transition happening both with the roster itself and Brandon Bucher after 7 or 8 years there, who's now at Hershey as the head coach and just trying to keep things organized and working through practice and running things there and making sure everybody's improving. I mean, there is a little bit of a culture of change happening there, but I would not count out this group from day one to the end of the year to keep getting better. I look at it in duels, and I really like Liam Flanagan at 106, Gavin Reynolds, probably in that 120 range. Those are two pretty tough kids who gave Swigert everything they got last year. Now they're sophomores, and I think maybe they can graduate from being those scrappy young kids to being pretty steady scorers for them. You've obviously got Repos at either 132 or 138. You've got Garvik probably settling in at 160, Ben Stewart back at 285. So you have some pieces at the bottom, the middle, and the top. The question is, are the other guys going to surround them and force teams to respect them, or are other teams going to be able to kind of bump around and avoid Repos or avoid Garvik and focus on the other way? So that's kind of the big key here.
Yeah, that depth factor again, being able to take those, Repos, Garvik, Flanagan, Reynolds, Beers, Stu, and spread them out and try to get matchups where you can, more, just with what they lost. I mean, man, Josh Miller, Bryce Buckman, Timmy Smith, Mosey, Pay, McClune. I mean, that's a lot of wins right there that you lost out of your lineup, and replacing all that is difficult. But like you said, they're gonna get the most out of their guys. Jeff's gonna get the most out of their guys. And if you really truly think that you're gonna show up and just beat Central Dolphin like that, you could beat them, but you're gonna have to wrestle. So he's gonna force you to bring your best. And like I said, the kid that I really like for them is the Garvik kid. I just feel like, man, that kid has a lot of potential. And watching him wrestle last year, he seemed a little young, you could just tell he was a little, immature as a freshman, but man, I like the way he wrestled. He's very, that mat IQ is very good. And man, I see him being a pretty big surprise this year. And I say surprise, but a guy that can maybe make some noise at the state level. Obviously, Repos is a tough kid, and I don't know. Jeff has enough guys returning to hang in there and make some noise, but he definitely is going to have to make up for some lost guys and a lost coach, because let's face it, Booker was there for a while. And they seemed to work pretty well together, and both were on the same page as far as their intensity and what they expected from the guys. So that'll be tough to replace that too. And but don't count Jeff out. Don't count Central Dolphin out of it.
Glad you mentioned Mike Beers, because Mike Beers is one of Swigert's favorites. Somebody who you talk about getting every ounce of their ability. That's where he's at.
Absolutely.
He's a junior now, and there's not a lot I would put past him.
Yeah.
I think he's got his eyes on trying to qualify for the state tournament, and the way that he goes about his business, I mean, it wouldn't stun me. You mentioned Ryan Garvik, and I was there at one of their practices a couple weeks ago and talking to Swigert about what's changed with their roster and how, losing guys can kind of affect you, not just in terms of your dual mates, but you had Ryan Garvik as a freshman last year who was drilling with Josh Miller and Bryce Buckman on either side of him in the lineup. Improvement was finding him, just wrestling those older guys, drilling with those guys. Improvement was happening, whether Garvik was pushing forward or not. Now he's in a situation where he's going to have to seek out partners. He's going to have to work on things. And the great example that Swigert gave was that, if you're wrestling a kid who, let's just say it's your average starter, that's who you're drilling with in a practice that day, you are going to try to work on some of the stuff that's down the list a little bit. You're going to try to work on something with your left hand. You're going to try to work on a new takedown. There are ways to improve yourself without having a state medalist to drill with. And that's the challenge now for a guy like Ryan Garvik, is to grow up in a hurry as a sophomore.
Yeah, the workout partner thing is big, because even like you said about the Beers kid, the hard work element of wrestling, right? Like you can't escape it. Like eventually, like talent, like they say, like hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work hard. Like it'll eventually catch up to you. And I don't know. I think that you got to find good partners. You got to be challenged in the room. You got to be willing to work hard in the room. So Swag is going to be asking Garvik as a sophomore to be a leader, and lead that team, and along with the repost kid, and he's going to have to step up to the plate and do that. And I think he will. They'll work hard, and Jeff will make sure that. But the workout partners is a big deal. And, I don't know. Is it going to hurt Garvik? I don't know. It might in the postseason. I don't know how much it will in the regular season, but if it comes down to it in the postseason, that might hurt him a little bit. But yeah, he's a tough kid and a hard worker. So I don't see, too much of a fall off there because of that situation. He'll definitely, Jeff will take care of that and make sure those guys work hard.
Your District 3 champs, trying to get back to that place again this postseason. Look down the division a little bit. State College, as you mentioned, Ryan Cummins, I think he has shown over his recent career that his guys are going to get better too. You won't see them obviously in the District 3 tournament. That's a District 6 team along with Mifflin County, but they've got Pearson Manville, who was a Greco-Roman national champ in the offseason. That Manville family does some really good work in freestyle and Greco. Now it's just about trying to translate. You talk about victims of that two-man advancing. Pearson Manville not getting out of the district round because he was he was beaten. I think he was beaten in the finals and then lost in the true second match. So he was a true victim of that situation. So, but he's a kid wrestling at 145 that can be an absolute anchor for them. Hayden Cunningham is a junior now. He missed his sophomore season with a knee injury. You're looking at him at 126. He'll be joined by his brother Asher, who they might go back to back in that state college lineup. Those are both Penn State assistant Casey Cunningham's kids. So you can kind of get a feel for what their pedigree, that's your word there, their pedigree and where they're coming from. But they've got some good pieces. They have lost quite a bit though. Looking at Lance Urbis and Carson Manville and Owen Woolcott, their heavyweights gone. So there are some things to figure out with State College, but there's also some interesting potential there.
There is. Ryan has done a great job, and where that program was when he took over to where it is now. I mean, I remember when he first took over, we'd go up there and wrestle, and multiple forfeits to travel, an hour and a half to go up there for that wasn't good. But now, I mean, man, oh day, first of all, Ryan's a great guy. He was a teammate of mine up at Penn State from Warwick High School. Again, just a class act. A gentleman, and I'm a big Ryan Cummings fan. I really like this State College team. I mean, here's a team that it could be a team to knock off a Cumberland Valley if Cumberland Valley doesn't show up. It can knock off a Central Dauphin. It can be right in the hunt there of that division title. And the pedigree thing. I mean, look, you're located in walking distance from Rec Hall at Penn State. What you get from Penn State being good and the buzz of wrestling up there. I mean, I just feel as if State College is a place where, as far as high school wrestling, man, you can really, wrap yourself into that whole aura up there and recruit kids and get kids out. So as much as they did lose some guys, I feel like they're going to have some good young guys step in with the younger Cunningham kid. They mentioned a kid by the last name of Mayer at 215 or heavyweight to go along with the Plavechko kid at 215. So dude, they're going to be okay. And, they're going to wrestle hard. And, the Manville kid, like you said last year, he was a true victim of the true second. And, definitely was a kid that should have been wrestling at the state tournament and didn't. And that's the sport of wrestling. And Hayden Cunningham, the older of the Cunningham boys, he was out last year with a knee injury. So he's coming back this year. They seem to spread out well. They have pedigree. They wrestle a good schedule. They'll be tough, for State College, for Mifflin County. I feel like sometimes, man, the travel in the division constantly to get dual meets. You're traveling down here an hour and a half, 2 hours every away match. I think it's hard to keep the kids who aren't your wrestlers per se in, and that's the challenge of really both those programs. I think within the division is the travel and the that's a lot. And either way, they have a tough group, and they're definitely going to make some noise this year. Like I said, they're actually ranked ahead of Cumberland Valley in the state rankings. So, it'll be interesting to see, but they definitely have some guys that are going to win some matches for them. So,
Bunch of wild cards and State College being one of them. I think Chambersburg is a wild card, and what Matt Menser has. They were 11-10 last year. I think sometimes as you get, especially as you get late in the year, I don't think Matt Menser would make it a secret that he is going to be trying to gear his team up for the individual championships. If push comes to shove, that's where his preference is going to lie. And that's one of the things that as you look in the back half of the schedule is, how hard is Chambersburg wrestling to try to win the Mid-Penn Commonwealth Division? How important is that? Or are you looking to try to make sure guys are healthy and getting the right matches? Even within the flow of dual meets, just making decisions that might be for the benefit of individuals as opposed to the team. I think it's just looking to win matches and looking to get guys better. And you can't argue with the results with this Chambersburg team, what they've been able to do. Tate Nichter moves on. It was Luke Nichter before him. You've got the Peck brothers looking back. They have a pretty steady run of guys who are legitimate state championship contenders. And as I mentioned earlier, Carl Schinderdecker is firmly in that group. Did it last year, really turned the corner in his career, proved himself at the highest of levels, reached the state finals at 120 pounds. He'll be back. That 126-pound weight class could be kind of tough around here and statewide, but he is among the tougher guys. And you look at, what else they have. They've got some options at the top of their lineup. Aiden Height is going to wrestle 189 and 215. He can go wherever Menser needs him to go. Zach Evans will wrestle 215. You probably see him at 285 sometimes, but they've got two other options at 285. So, you look at the gamesmanship and the top and the top of that lineup, he can do some things that probably no other team in the division can do.
Yeah, I mean, Matt is always a guy that has always been geared towards the individual season. I mean, if you ask him that, he'll tell you that. And but as a team, I feel like don't let them sleep on. Don't sleep on Chambersburg. I mean, he's kind of playing it down a little bit. That he has some good individuals, but who does he have back? Well, he has the Carter kid back at 13 and 20, his own kid back at 20-26, Schinderdecker, the Davenport kid, and then as you mentioned, the Height kid at 89, Evans at 215. I mean, there's 6 kids that I just mentioned that all have a solid amount of experience. I really like their upper weights. I was impressed with the Height kid and Evans as young kids, and seem to wrestle hard. They have a good frame on them. Both of the guys are look good, and I look for those two to make some noise up top. I don't know where they're at right now as far as development. I know that if I'm banking on Matt to develop kids, they should be about there, man, and on their way there. And again, I'm a big fan of good upper weights when it comes to team wrestling, as you know, and those guys are going to score a lot of points for them this year.
And I don't know what Matt or what's in the water in Chambersburg. They've always got a bunch of pretty good big kids who are starting their careers in the upper weights. Luke Nichter was a good example of that, starting their careers there, getting tough matches as a freshman against a bunch of seniors. I mean, that's what you're looking at. Aiden Height and Zach Evans, those are investments, I think, into their future. Now Aiden Height is a sophomore who's gotten a bunch of good matches, and Zach Evans, a bunch of good matches. He was a freestyle All-American over the summer too. And I think that momentum can help carry. I know he was pondering whether making a more permanent jump to 285. It looks like he's going to settle in for the postseason at 215, but they've got big guys and these kids can wrestle and they've got good experience at those weights. Mifflin County, I don't know what jumps out for you with them. I mean, obviously you lose Trey Kibe, who was in the state finals, I believe 3 times, lost in the 172 finals this past year, but Nick Allison, will be at 113, 120. He's a senior. He was a state medalist a couple of years ago. They've got the Kyler Everly kid coming back in the middle there. Trey Shoemaker, Anson Wagner. You've got a pretty nice collection of kids here. And this is where you get into that picking somebody to finish last, it's brutal if you're going to pick a team like Mifflin County to finish last, because they're in the state rankings. They're a team that could just as easily be contending for first.
That's it, man. You hit the nail on the head. And I obviously Nick Allison, it would be probably the top returner on their team. But look, the Cunningham kid and Everly, Shoemaker, Wagner, like those guys win a lot of matches. Now the Puppo kid, I think he was 2 years ago, he was in their lineup at 215. And I mean, this dude is a mountain. And he got hurt last year, I believe, during football season and didn't compete last year. So he's back at 215. He's going to be a tough 215 bounder for anybody in that division to beat, in my opinion. I mean, he when I say he's put together, I mean, this kid is strapped. And, don't let him fly under the radar on you either. But, yeah, and Kirby, he's a guy that's been there for a while. I like Kirby. He does a good job. And look out, man. You can't sleep on any of these teams in this division. And to put Mifflin County at the bottom, I struggle to do, but somebody's got to be there. And this is what you and I were talking about before. Like, somebody's got to finish last. And I don't know. It's going to be interesting. Who can hold it together the longest? Who can keep it together? Who can not come untethered? What team can have guys who stay healthy? What team can have guys who stay out of trouble? What team can have guys who, don't get any skin infections? Eligibility, whatever it may be. That's going to be
too, and then peak at the end of the year,
and then peak at the right time. Add the wrestling element in. It's tough. It's tough to pick a team at the bottom here, but any of these teams can beat one another. If anybody doesn't show up, and it was kind of funny. Talking to Billy, and he was telling me, like, when he was at Mannheim, a lot of times he would show up to matches and there'd be so many forfeits where their matches would be done in 20, 30 minutes sometimes, depending on who they wrestled. And I said, well, I got to promise you one thing, man. You're not going to have that here. You're going to show up every match, every dual meet, and you're going to be in one. So, which is good for the sport. It's good for the fans. That's what people want to see. So, like I said, Mifflin County, I think aren't going to be as traditionally tough as they were maybe years ago, but don't sleep on them. Don't sleep on them.
Especially as you mentioned, if you're going to Mifflin County on a cold Tuesday in January, are you ready when you get there? Because that's a whole nother dynamic.
That's a whole nother dynamic. So listen, we went up there, I'm going to say a year or two ago, and we go up there, make you a long trip, and I'm worried because of the long trip, and are the guys ready? Well, we warm up on the mat, and they had like Whitney Houston, "I Will Always Love You" playing, like in the music, and it was like this real like sentimental, like soft music. So look, I know what they're doing. You know what I mean? I know exactly.
You got guys in your locker room crying.
Yeah, no doubt. Like, guys who are like hugging their parents before they wrestle. So I had to like get them off the mat. Let's get off the mat and get in the locker room and get ready to go. And I love that kind of stuff. So. And you said it, like, depends on where you wrestle State College. It depends on where you wrestle Mifflin County. Location means something with those two teams, and they are tough at home. So
last but definitely not least here is the Cedar Cliff Colts, who are not far removed from winning a couple District 3 team titles. They've got some tough kids in their lineup. They've got some pretty good balance. They do have some guys that they're trying to replace, but they continue, in terms of tradition, Cedar Cliff and what they've been able to do as a program, they take as much pride in that as any team that you'll find in the Mid-Penn Conference, any team around here. And where that shows up is where you're looking at now, where you've got, a bunch of freshmen and sophomores who are going to be able to be ready and contribute. It looks like, without talking to Rick Tamanowski, their coach, about this, it looks like there was a group of guys that they had to make decisions on last year. They held them down in junior high to get more matches. And now they're making the jump up, looking at Gabe Lewis, Evan Ziegler, Gunnar Hiller at 285 as a freshman, Ben Myers, who's a sophomore in the upper weights. You had a kid, Mike Jones, who wrestled pretty tough for them in the upper weights last year. You're looking at some of these younger guys who I think they stayed patient with them and they did the best thing for them, even if they might have been able to help with the numbers and the depth at the varsity level last year. And it's just kind of, will they reap the rewards of that this year?
I again, I can't believe like we're picking them last, but I mean, here's the deal: they have a good group of guys coming back. The Cutshaw kid, Paradigm, Bachman, Aiden Bachman's going to be tough. The Haas kid, the Jones kid. Now they lost the Aiden Lewis and the Almond kid, the Ikea kid up top. But here's the deal: they have a nice little group of freshmen and junior high guys. Last year when we wrestled them, my junior high coaches, when I asked them how the match went, they said of all the teams they wrestled, they were impressed with Cedar Cliff's young guys. They knew how to wrestle. And they said they're gonna be good in a couple of years, man. They got some good young guys down there, and I think that's what you're seeing here. They listed as far as newcomers to watch, the young Lewis kid, and then there's like 3 Zigglers. You have Evan Ziegler, Keegan Ziegler, and Kyle Ziegler. I know the Ziegler family. Again, their dad wrestled at Mechanicsburg back in the day. Was a tough guy there, and then the Myers kid and Hiller at 285, who's a freshman. I used to, I knew his dad, Jerry Hiller, wrestled for Lower Dolphin. He was a heavyweight. So there's some pedigree there. I mean, here we are, we're looking at this division and we have Cedar Cliff and Mifflin County sitting at 5 or 6. But if you drop those 2 teams down to the Keystone division, they would be near the top, in all honesty. So, it's just a meat grinder of a division and one that, hey, at the end of the day, if Cedar Cliff can hold it together, they might end up near the top. I mean, who knows? And, that's the great thing about the sport. And it'll be interesting to see where Rick's team kind of finishes out here.
In a best case scenario, you can make a case for Mifflin County, State College, Chambersburg, Cedar Cliff, Central Dauphin, Cumberland Valley. You can make a case for all of them to make a run at this thing. And I think that's what's going to make it so fun, is that you don't really have, that one dominant force or 2 dominant forces back. You've got, some teams who are going to try to duke it out. And you've got some teams that, I have no doubts whatsoever that when Rick and his crew see this and they see where the coaches voted them, there is going to be a little bit of a chip there. There's going to be a little bit of extra motivation to prove people wrong. And they've got a group that doesn't have a lot of household names there now, but there are a few kids in there who can grow to be household names. And just the final point with Cedar Cliff too, is that I like the postseason that they had last year, for Isaiah Almond to reach the super regional round, and for, John Cunningham wrestled tough. You had guys who peaked at the right time, and they weren't exactly, the candidates that you would have circled before the year began. I think that bodes well for some of these other guys to get better and to make a similar run this postseason.
Yeah, and you're right. They didn't have a bad little postseason last year, all things considered, and as far as taking less qualifiers and all that. I expect them to be in the thick of things. If any of these teams in this division think they're just going to show up and roll over Cedar Cliff, that's not going to happen. And then in next year, the amount of young guys they have and moving forward, they're going to set themselves up for some success in this division. I can promise you that. Wrestler of the year in this division. It's kind of funny. I feel like all the divisions we've talked about, we've kind of had a pretty standout individual that we feel is going to be the wrestler of the year. In this division, who do you think?
Well, I mean, Schinderdecker is the closest thing to a favorite, but just like the teams, I mean, the word favorite is kind of, it doesn't quite mean the same thing. You've got Pearson Manville who can make a run, if he's standing at the top of the podium at the end of the year, that would surprise nobody. Same thing with Matt Repos can make a run. Ryan Garvick can make a run here. I mean, 1 or 2 of those Chambersburg guys, other than Schinderdecker, can make it. Zach Evans at 215. Who knows?
I feel like every team I could name a person that could have a heck of a year, from, Belga, Cumberland Valley to Repost to, the Manville kid to Schinderdecker to Nick Allison to, I know that the Cedar Cliff coaches are big on the Bachman kid. Here are guys that we're listing for each of those teams that if they have a good year, they could be wrestler of the year. You don't know what can happen. So, as much parity as there is in team stuff here, there's just as much parity as some of the individuals. So it'll be interesting to see.
100%. All bets are off here in the Mid-Penn Commonwealth Division. Buckle up. It should be a fun ride this year. That's Dave Heckard. I'm Dustin Hockensmith. We will be shifting gears here as we get into the season. We'll be talking every Monday. That's the plan. Looking back at what happened the previous weekend and looking ahead to one or two things to spotlight and really lean on Dave's experience and expertise in terms of trying to break down some dual meets and help us figure out what needs to go right for teams to win. It's going to be a fun time. We have one more division by the time you listen to this, the Keystone division that you'll be listening to. We also have all these divisions up, previewed in written form on PennLive.com. So check all that stuff out. Subscribe, download. You can do that on Spotify, Apple, and iHeartRadio. We'll be getting into the teeth of the season this weekend, including this Cumberland Valley Kickoff Classic. So be sure to check that out. We will be back next week to look back on all those things and look ahead to week number 2 here. Thanks for tuning in to the Penn Live Wrestling Podcast, and we'll see you next time.